Welcome, everybody, to the Hoops Habit Hangout. Now, technically, this is our 18th show, but it's our first show on the Fan-Sided Network in this new format that we have. With us, as always, I am the founder and editor-in-chief, Michael Dunlap. We have Phil Watson. Phil, tell us about yourself.
I am the assistant editor of Hoops Habit. I'm also the editor of another fan-sided site, Dairyland Express. Just, a sports guy from way back.
There you go. Gerald?
My name's Gerald Bourget. I'm the assistant to the regional editor of Hoops Habit, and I cover the Suns and the Warriors, and I'm also a radio host on a show called Bras, Panties, and Sports.
I like the first two. The last one, I'm not so sure. Nathan Geese is our guest. He is our NCAA expert over at HoopsHabit.com. Tell us about yourself.
Well, like Michael said, I cover the NCAA basketball for when it's in season. When it's out of season, I focus my attention on the NBA draft and just kind of general NBA knowledge, some rookie focus, and just whatever's asked of me. I'm there to do it.
Great. All right, give you guys a quick rundown of the show. We are on Twitter right now, so if you guys want to ask us questions or interact with us at Hoops Habit, we will make sure to get back to you. We're going to do, each of our columnists is going to do a individual segment talking about the conference finals, talking about Kevin Love. We'll go into a question and answer segment with Nathan Geese, and then we're going to finish with kind of a speed round of sorts where we fill in the blank, do some word association, fun stuff like that. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Phil Watson talking about the Pacers and the Heat series. It's is it a series?
Technically it is if you go with the definition that it's not a series until a road team wins. There has been one road win in the series, so technically yes, it is a series. But if I'm the Indiana Pacers or one of their fans who have gone through just a dreadful last couple of months with the fragility of this team's psyche. You're at home where you had the best record in the NBA during the regular season. The best player in the league has the worst game he's ever had in the playoffs, the least productive game, and Miami still had a chance to win the game in the closing seconds. That can't feel good going back to Miami. I mean, if you're telling me that LeBron James plays 24 minutes and scores 7 points, and Indiana wins by 3 and has to dodge a late three-pointer to get out of there with the win, I'm telling you, you're crazy. So,
what do you have, 5 fouls in 13 minutes?
5 fouls in 13 minutes.
Wow. Something interesting about that series, starting point guard, George Hill. 1.6 assists per game over the first 5 games. That's your starting point guard. I'm pretty sure I could go out there and just throw the ball to somebody and scoop up an assist here or there.
Yeah, he's fourth in the series. He's fourth on the Pacers in assists. Behind the shooting guard, the small forward who's taking 16.8 shots a game, and the power forward. So, yeah.
Yummy. So it's a foregone conclusion then? They're going back to Miami? Indiana has no chance to win on the road?
I didn't see anything in games 3 and 4 that leads me to believe that they do. No.
I've got Miami by 30 in game 6, probably.
Yeah. I'm thinking it's definitely double digits. My thoughts are somewhere in the 15 to 18 range. Lance Stephenson is in some ways having a great series. 14.5 points, 5.8 assists, 6.2 boards, and 4 or 5 shake your head, what the hell are you doing incidents per game. I mean, I got to give LeBron James a lot of credit for self-control. If another dude is blowing in my ear on the basketball court, he's getting an elbow in the mouth, I'll take the technical. There are just some lines that shouldn't get crossed.
Has he crossed into Swaggy P territory? Is he crazy?
I think he may have crossed all the way into Meta World Peace territory. You know, he may have entered the Mike Tyson zone at this point. He's not untying sneakers, so, you know, he's got that for him. And no, Lance, that was not a suggestion if you're watching. But I mean, butting into the huddle, that was really Bush League. And the thing is that his own guys are as frustrated with it as anybody else is. You know, there's talk both public and private that they really wish that whatever sideshow act he's trying to pull would go away.
Well, I tell you what, if I'm on the court and you've got a guy who's an irritant, somebody who's doing those types of things, it's one thing if you're tugging on a guy's jersey or, you know, setting illegal picks or, you know, maybe trash talking a little bit, but once you go over the line into like the crazy zone,
yeah,
where, you know, you got the crazy eyes, you're blowing in guys' ears. I don't even know. I'm not sure I want to know what the next thing he's going to do. I mean, we may get a Serge Ibaka cut chop if we're not careful.
Yeah.
I feel like Lance Stephenson perfectly embodies the Indiana Pacers because he has all this talent. He has these flashes of brilliance, which for the Pacers was pretty much their whole first half of the season. But then at the same time, he's immature. He goes off the rails a lot, and he's just really frustrating. I mean, if the Pacers somehow do win these next 2 games and go to the finals, I mean, are Pacers fans like excited at this point after the last 2 months?
Or are they terrified?
It has to be the least exciting finals appearance in the history of the NBA at this point.
Well, they've shown all the emotional resilience and stability of a 13-year-old girl the last 2 months. You know, everything is high drama. You know, an all-star center who can't handle the threat of another tall gentleman being introduced into the locker room who has no knee tissue left. And that was enough to throw him into, you know, this 2-month-long funk. He's shooting a whopping 42% for the series, which is, and he's averaging double figures somehow. But yeah, the disappearance of Roy Hibbert into whatever zone of emotional fragility he's gone into, we may have to call it the Roy Hibbert zone, actually, because I'm not sure I've ever seen anything quite like this in the NBA before.
I feel like he's he's not a banger, obviously, and he's not a finesse player either. So what is he?
He's a bangingness player.
Finesse?
Finesse.
Finanger? Finanger? I don't know. I don't like it. All right, so we pretty much have a consensus here. You know, this series is going to be over. You know,
I fully expect
hope the Pacers. I kind of hope the Pacers show up. I'd love to see a Game 7. I'd love to see LeBron just stick a dagger in him at Indiana by about 50 points in Game 7.
Larry Bird hasn't done a lot of things wrong as the personnel guy in Indiana. But he totally misread the chemistry on that team when he brought in Bynum and Turner. It disrupted everything. It blew apart whatever mojo they had. And the combined total of those 2 big additions, by the way, for this series is 1 minute, 4 points, 1 rebound, 1 turnover. Or 1 game, 4 minutes, 1 rebound, 1 turnover. That's what Evan Turner has contributed in the series.
I think Danny Granger could have done that, maybe.
Possibly. I think Danny Granger, without his knees, could have done that.
That's pretty solid.
You know, and Bynum got sent home. He's good at that.
Bynum is good at that. It gives him more time to work on his...
We'll keep sending you the checks. Just go away.
And he'll keep cashing them.
Oh, no doubt.
Anything else to add, Phil?
No, that's about it. I don't expect a... I'm hoping for a competitive game tomorrow night, but I have no expectations of one.
And Gerald's on record as saying the Heat are going to win by 40. Go ahead and mortgage your house.
I'm not painting my head.
All right, fine. Let us move on. We've got the Kevin Love situation. It's it's interesting in a couple of ways to me because, number one, I can understand Kevin Love's position. He's upset. He wants to win. He's been in the league now 6 years, has yet to play a playoff game. And the question is, for me, number one, is he a superstar? What do you guys think? Is Kevin Love a superstar?
Yes.
I have a category for this, actually. I like to call them superstars without portfolio. He does everything that you expect a superstar to do, except that whole postseason thing where you really build a reputation.
Okay, so you think that he's kind of like a stat stuffer then, basically. I mean, he puts up big numbers and
he's superstar light at this point, because he does put up the big numbers. But at some point when you're putting up the big numbers, there has to be at least some accountability for making your team better, taking them to the next level, what have you.
That's true. All right, so as I'm looking at his numbers and thinking about his game, I felt like 3 years ago, the 2011-2012 season, where it looked like he was really coming into his own. He was going to be, he was a potential MVP candidate, 26 points, 13.3 rebounds, efficiency rating 25.4. It looked like he was really going to be something special. Then he goes ahead and breaks his hand, has a terrible 2012-2013 season, led us into last year. I think a lot of people don't realize two things. Number one, he only missed 5 games last year. So any kind of durability questions, he had missed 11 games, then he only played 18 games 2 seasons ago. There's no durability issue with him at this point. The second thing that I don't think people realize is he actually had a better season last year than he did when we were talking about him as a potential up and coming MVP guy. 26.1 points, 12.5 rebounds, 4.4 assists. Shot 37.6% from 3, 82% from the free throw line. His efficiency rating was actually better this year than it's been in his entire career, 26.9. But you get back to what you were talking about as far as you also have to win. If you want respect and you want people to say, yeah, he's a stud, you got to at least play in one playoff game in 6 years. As far as his game is concerned, I think everybody knows that offensively, he's a stud. He's a great rebounder, a great outlet passer for his size, a very good shooter. But defensively, people kind of poo-poo on him, and I don't think it's really fair. I looked this up earlier to give you guys a little bit of kind of a question here. So the Wolves' offense is number 3 in scoring, just points. They play a frenetic pace, understandably. They're number 26 in points allowed. However, they're number 9 in offensive rating, and they're number 12 in defensive rating. They weren't that bad.
That was always the surprising thing to me, because a couple of the components of my power rankings are one of the components is the net rating, and I was always surprised how upper middle of the pack Minnesota was defensively, given the reputation that they have.
Yeah, the fact is they just sucked in close games until late in the year, and it really just killed their record. And they finished 40-42, which is not anything to get terribly excited about. But when you consider that they lost, I'm just trying to remember here, but I believe it was their first 10 or 11 games that were
I think it was
inside
13.
Was it 13 games that was inside of 2 or 3 points? I mean,
yeah.
That's the difference between making the playoffs and not, if you perform well in that situation. So as far as his defense is concerned, though, he held opposing power forwards to a 14.2 efficiency rating. That's pretty darn good.
Below league average.
I mean, no one in their right mind thinks that Kevin Love's going to make an all-defensive team, but I think we can all agree if he were an all-defensive player, he's absolutely a superstar, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
The knock on him is that defensively, he might not be that much of a leader, but if he were a better defensive player, we could consider him a superstar.
See, I'm with you. I don't see the defensive deficiencies. Okay, he's not going to be a shot blocker, but not every good defender is a shot blocker.
Mhm.
One of the best defenders I ever saw wasn't a particularly great shot blocker. Dennis Rodman in his heyday.
I
He did
think
a lot of things well. He was not a great shot blocker.
I think if you put Kevin Love with a center who can block shots like Omer Asik in Houston, Dwight Howard in Houston, or Joakim Noah in Chicago,
Or Gorgie Dang.
or Gorgie Dang, sure. But
I mean,
I really think
Love looked a heck of a lot better late in the year when Deng was playing.
he did. But I think it really depends on the defensive scheme that he's in, and no offense to Rick Adelman because he's a tremendous coach, but he was not the right man for this job.
And now we may get Vinny Del Negro. We'll talk more about that later. We'll talk about that later.
So you won't have an offensive scheme either. That'll be fun.
So as far as Love holding the opposing power forwards to a substandard efficiency rating, Blake Griffin, considered to be pretty close to a superstar. If he's definitely a star, maybe not a superstar yet, but a star. 17.1. LaMarcus Aldridge, a guy that people were showing a lot of love to over their little playoff run. Opposing power forwards hit him for a 14.7 efficiency rating. Serge Ibaka, who people say is the next coming of basketball defensive Jesus in the middle, a great rim protector. 14.1, so barely better than Love. Now, I understand that stat's a little bit noisy, so I looked a little bit deeper. According to Synergy Sports, in the post, Kevin Love's number 44 in the league, giving up 0.77 points per possession. That's solid. I mean, very good. You're not going to be an all-defensive player. The problem for him is against spot-up shooters, he was number 148 in the league. And I think a big reason for that is the fact that he's such a dominant defensive rebounder that he just does not want to get pulled away from the rim. And, maybe he doesn't have the quickness to go back and forth and do both things at once, so he decides to just lay back and play it. But as far as his situation is concerned now, Minnesota has a really, really tough decision because aside from the Sacramento Kings, no team's going to want to take him if they can't have some kind of assurances. Is he going to opt in? Is he going to extend? What's going to happen? So for Kevin Love, he's got all the power right now. Imagine a sweet offer comes in from, we'll say, a team like Phoenix. A bunch of picks, a couple of young players. Kevin Love can completely squash this deal by saying, no, there's no way I'm going to extend in Phoenix. If he says those words, I mean, the fans aren't going to accept him. His teammates aren't going to accept him, knowing that he's got a foot out the door. What do the Timberwolves do at that point? They're stuck to having to deal with just a handful of teams. And when I did my piece this week on different trade scenarios, none of them really stood out as being all that exciting. I think the draft lottery killed the Wolves because they really needed one of those preferred teams to have one of the top 3 picks. And instead you've got Cleveland, Milwaukee, Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Pick. He doesn't want to play any of those places. They're not going to get those picks without a glut of, number 11, number 14, number 16. They're going to have to throw the kitchen sink at those teams to get one of those picks away from them. So what do?
It's the Carmelo Anthony situation. It's got a lot of similarities to it. The difference being that I'm not sure Flip Saunders is going to be as skilled as Ujiri at getting somebody to overpay when he has no leverage. I still think that was one of the most brilliant deals I've seen, that he was able to get pretty close to equal value when you add all the package together in a situation where he had no leverage as the GM of the Nuggets.
Guys, anything to add?
That's a good point to bring up, is that when you trade a superstar or a star, if we're not convinced that Kevin Love is a superstar, you're never going to get your full value back, especially if your plan after that is to go into rebuild. So honestly, the best deal that they can get, even it's not going to come close to matching up to what they're losing, but they're going to have to take whatever Kevin Love will give them, I guess, in this situation.
Right.
Oh,
Your best case scenario is to get about 75 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't want to get into is a deal where it ends up being a giveaway, where you get 10 cents on the dollar back.
Yeah, they're going to have to roll the dice with draft picks, and they're going to have to hope that they can get something in those middle rounds or in the middle of the first round that can turn into something. But John Lugo, I see you, man. Hoops Habit alumni, thinks that Kevin Love's going to stay in Minnesota one more year. The Spurs give him a max deal next summer once the Big Three is off the books, and he gives us a little maniacal laugh. I appreciate that. You are insane. So we're just going to go ahead and move on. Next up,
he's onto something there.
As far as the Spurs are concerned?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Spurs, they're going to be players if you look at it. Love to the Spurs. I like that idea.
I can see a scenario where he ends up in San Antonio, yeah.
I don't even want to talk to you guys anymore about this. I can't handle it. All right, next up, Gerald Bourget is going to talk about the Thunder and the Spurs series. Tonight did not exactly go the Thunder's way. Gerald, why don't you talk a little bit about that? Oh, okay. Gerald's going to have to come back to us.
Or maybe he won't.
Maybe he won't. Maybe
now, see, by my earlier definition, the Western Conference Finals still isn't a series.
Since no team has won on the road.
Since no team has won on the road. I forget who I heard that from the first time, and I thought initially, wow, that's dumb, but it actually makes sense.
Well, it does make the regular season more important.
Yeah.
If you're going to think about that, the fact that you take care of your home court advantage, you can't lose the series.
That is something that Indiana has not done so well. That is probably the most amazing stat of the postseason to me. That in 12 games, the Pacers have lost as many games at home as they did in 41 games during the regular season.
I mean, you can't forget the fact that they're facing stiffer competition and the Hawks.
Yeah.
Sorry, Atlanta fans. Your franchise is really nice to Hoops Habit. I appreciate it, but my Phoenix Suns didn't get in winning all those games, and you guys did, so I'm still a little sore. You know what? I tell you what. Why don't we go ahead and ask Nathan a couple of our questions then, and if Gerald gets his technical issues worked out, he will get back. So, yeah, and we'll jump back to that.
Yep.
Nathan, first question for you. NCAA or 30 D-League affiliates, which is better for not only the health of the league, but for the players themselves?
Well, with the way the system is set up right now, it's the NCAA. But if they were to change up how they run the D-League, expand it into 30 teams like you're suggesting, then obviously I think the D-League would work out. But there are a couple of problems with that right now. There's only one instance where a player has gone straight from high school to the D-League, and then he ended up getting put back into the draft, went to a team, got traded. He's never made an NBA roster. He's never played a minute in the NBA. There's only one instance of that happening. But with the way the system's set up, take, for example, this year, P.J. Hairston got into some trouble at UNC, was going to be ineligible for the year, so he went to go play in the D-League. He says that, well, Phil doesn't like what I'm saying.
He was so upset about talking about Hairston, he had to leave.
PJ says that the D-League helped him expand a lot more. But the problem is, he's playing for the Mavericks affiliate in the D-League. He might have signed with that affiliate and the D-League, but Dallas has no control over him. All he does is he plays for them for a year, and then he's put into the NBA draft just like everybody else. There would have to be a system in place where if you come straight out of high school to the D-League, then you'd have your own separate mega draft. The D-League does have a draft of its own, but it's on a much smaller scale. There's smaller players involved. And it's mostly guys that have already played in the D-League being put back into the draft pool.
Well, what about the issue of money?
there is an issue with money, but the thing is, if you're going to play in the D League, you got to expect a small contract, small pay cut. I think I saw today players are making about 50 grand to play basketball for a season. Okay, you're making 50 grand. I think you're going to be doing okay. That's just me. You're not going to be making millions and millions of dollars. But that is another issue. The NBA teams, the league, and the D League itself would have to find a way to funnel money into the D League. And that's just a process that's not going to be very quick. It's going to be long, drawn out, if it happens at all.
Hold on 1 second. The WNBA certainly is not staying afloat on their own. They have no problems funneling money into the WNBA and keeping that going. I don't see how it would be that big of a deal, especially because the teams have to want this to happen. I mean, it's trending in that direction where teams are getting their own affiliate. And if they could bypass the NCAA and all these silly rules and violations and be able to get that kid right out of high school, start grooming him for the NBA lifestyle instead of sending him straight to college and him picking up habits and getting in trouble and dealing with different kinds of coaches and attitudes and all the potential for that, why wouldn't the owners want a minor leagues, if you will, instead of having to send these guys off to college?
Oh, most definitely.
I have an answer to that.
Okay, go ahead, Phil.
It's because they've never had to pay for a minor league before. The NCAA has been their de facto minor league for 60 years, 70 years almost. So if you've never had to pay for something yourself, you're not going to be as willing to start paying for it than, as opposed to something like the WNBA, where from Jump Street they've been funneling money into it. It doesn't make logical sense, but that it's more on an emotional level. If I haven't had to pay for player development before, why should I start having to pay for it now?
I totally understand what you're saying, but thinking about like the actual figures, I mean, if a good player or any player, it's not that there's going to be this wide range of contract values here. If it's $50,000 a player and they've got 12 players on their roster, $600,000. You talk about the cost of running the team, the cost of coaching, et cetera, drops in a bucket. I mean, it's really not that big of a deal to a team to put a couple million into their development system, especially if they have a vested interest in it and are wanting to bring those people in for themselves and have control over these players, right?
And that's going to be the key, is figuring out, if my D-League team gets an 18-year-old fresh out of high school, does he drop into the common draft pool at 19, or if they up the age to 20, or do I retain rights to him after that year or two is up? That's going to be the big ball of worms that's going to have to be untangled.
Because when you have that young a player going into the D League, you want some assurance that the money you put into his development, you're going to get a payoff off of that. Not just we developed them, now some other team's going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, Mark Cuban's not going to be happy if he pays for the 2 years of development time for a guy to play for the Texas Legends, and he ends up playing in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I love college basketball, but the NCAA is a joke altogether. So I don't blame them for wanting to go away from the NCAA, because it's going to close in on itself eventually anyway. But to have D-League affiliates doing all of the development into the players, into the league, that's a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of process that's not going to play out very smoothly. And then if you look at it, there's big-time coaches in college basketball that do have a lot of pull. John Calipari, he's a farm system in himself. So, I mean, if you got guys like Calipari who are funneling these players straight from college to the pros, 1 year they're going to be good to go, they're going to be good players, brought up the way that you want your NBA players brought up. And I think you could see some sort of working connection between the NCAA and the NBA. But this is not something that can play out overnight. It's going to be a long process if anything happens at all.
Okay. John Wall, who took time to develop, Anthony Davis, and wow. I haven't seen any of Calipari's other guys from Kentucky jump off the page at me.
No,
If anything, a lot of them have been disappointments.
Right, because
And
again,
from his Memphis days, there's Derrick Rose and there's everybody else.
right, but that's also another thing of the pieces I've been working on this week, the Boom or Bust series, is that you're not going to find a lot of 18, 19-year-old kids that are going to develop rather quickly. You make them go to college for 1 year, but, I mean, you only have them for 1 year, so you can only do so much with them. But if you put them in the D-League, again, you're getting them for 1 year with the system it's set up. It's different development, is kind of a testing pool, if you will, of just how to develop these players, because they don't have to do that right now. They have other coaches developing these players. And it's rare to find an 18, 19-year-old kid who's ready to go into the NBA and take over. Because for every Kobe Bryant, there's an Eddie Curry coming straight out of high school and just flaming out in the NBA.
For every Kevin Garnett, there's a Leon Smith.
Exactly. There's a good group of players that have been able to do that, but there's many, many more that haven't.
All right, Phil, why don't you go ahead and ask Nathan your question?
I remember a time when the draft was about picking players who could come in and help you right away. You ran your draft to get better. And over the course of the last couple of decades in particular, it's all become about upside. You're drafting today for a player who might not be a significant contributor until the last year or two of his rookie contract. And why has that change taken place, and why is the emphasis so much more on freaky athletic ability than good basketball players?
You see, upside, to me, is the most overused and meaningless word in all of sports. It is shoved down your throat every time you hear about a prospect. I'm going to use Andrew Wiggins here because that's the one guy everybody wants to talk about. The only thing you hear about this guy is he can jump high, good athlete, huge upside. But what does upside mean? I mean, does it mean where he could go, what he is now? I mean, all that is saying that, yeah, he could be good. Well, there's a lot of factors into if they are actually good. They got to fit into the right team, have the right coaching staff, have the right training staff, and the right mentality going in order to reach that upside. There's a lot of guys that don't. And if you, let's look at Cleveland now. Cleveland's been the brink of really bad or decently good for the last couple of years. Everybody kind of expected that they would fight for a playoff spot this last year. That didn't work out, and here they are again with the number one pick. Well, they go with a guy like Andrew Wiggins. Yeah, but he's got great upside, so think about him in 5 years. Well, then Cleveland's just right back where they started because they're still working to develop players. They're not getting any better right now, even though they probably could get into the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So I don't really know. I wish I knew why. I just don't like it.
Yeah, because the thing, Cleveland is a great example. Because if they take Wiggins this year and say that he doesn't really develop into what, even a resemblance of what people are expecting him to develop into until year 3, Irving is already gone.
Mm-hmm.
Bennett is on the last year of his rookie deal. It seems to me like you're rebuilding in perpetuity that way.
And there's no telling how many head coaches the Cavs are going to go through by that time as well.
Well, what would that be, 3 more years? Probably 3.
And yeah, at least one of those would be Mike Brown again.
Yes.
Gerald, welcome back.
Hello.
Hey, and this is the most solid connection you've had yet. We should have done this a long time ago.
Right.
All right, well, we have just asked Nathan our NCAA questions, and So at this point, why don't you jump into the Western Conference Finals, which it was ugly tonight for the Thunder.
Yes, it was, and it pretty much killed what my talking points were. But so now that the Spurs have proven that they can beat the Thunder without or with Serge Ibaka on the floor, does anyone still have the Thunder winning this series? No.
Nope. I don't see the Thunder beating them in San Antonio the way that they've looked when they've played on the road.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because when you looked at the series, you thought that the clear difference was Serge Ibaka coming back. In games 1 and 2, the Spurs were averaging 60 points per game in the paint on 67% shooting on those shots. And then in 3 and 4, with Ibaka back in the lineup, even in game 3, he wasn't 100%. You know, you could tell he was clearly hobbled, but he was still challenging shots. In those 2 games, those numbers dropped to 38 points per game in the paint on 46% shooting. And until tonight, with Ibaka out there, the Spurs hadn't cracked 100 points. The Thunder had an 18-4 advantage in blocks. It just looked like Serge Ibaka was the key to beating the Spurs in this series. But after tonight, maybe it's just home court advantage. I don't know.
I want to look at something on Ibaka's numbers tonight. Where are we? Oof, that was ugly. Ibaka was 3 for 10 from the floor, which tells me that maybe San Antonio figured something out about defending that pick and pop. Because that, I thought, was as big a key as his defense in games 3 and 4. Was that he presented a defensive problem for San Antonio that neither Adams nor Collison presented.
Right. His mid-range game is that deadly that he can spread the defense out, and that opens up lanes for Westbrook and Durant and Reggie Jackson even to attack the basket. But I've got a question for you guys. So now that we know that this isn't going to be a 2012 Western Conference Finals repeat, out of Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and Serge Ibaka, how would you rank those players in order of most valuable to least valuable to extending this to 7 games?
Well, for me, I like Westbrook as a player more than I like Durant. But as far as extending the series is concerned, I think Durant is more important because look at tonight, for example. Russell Westbrook put up solid numbers again, 21 points, 7 assists, 3 steals, got to the free throw line 9 times, 6 of 12 from the field. Kevin Durant, yeah, he scored 25 points, but he was a minus 22, 5 rebounds, got to the free throw line 4 times, 1 for 4 from the free throw line. This is a guy who...
He's a 90% free throw shooter.
Well, not only the percentage, but he used to get to the free throw line with reckless abandon. He was there all the time, and it seems like teams have realized, hey, you know, we can keep this guy off the free throw line, keep him on the outside shooting jumpers, and yeah, he might get his points, but the team's not going to win. So for me, I think Durant has to be the key, but not for the reason that a lot of people might think.
Interesting stat, Durant led the league in free throws this season.
Yeah.
So him attempting 4 in a pivotal Game 5 that would have allowed them to close it at home, that's kind of big. Phil, what do you think?
In terms of value, I have to think Durant is the key to the thing. But Westbrook, I mean, I would have him as a 1A and a 1B. Durant and Westbrook are like peanut butter and jelly to that team. If both of them can get going, then they're going to be okay. If it's only one of them, or God forbid neither of them, they got no shot.
Okay. Geese, what about you?
I do think it's Durant, mostly because Westbrook just looks like he's on a roll right now, and he can't really be stopped. But there comes a point where what Westbrook does isn't going to get them to where they need to go. But what Durant does and adds to what Westbrook can bring to the table, that can get them there. And they do need a great game from both of them. A little bit of surge, more than he did tonight. Durant is the Thunder, and he needs to do something more than he did tonight.
Right, and I'm going to agree with all of you for a reason that we haven't brought up yet, is that if you look at this series, everyone's kind of had a game. Like when the first two games were pretty much the entire Spurs team, and Danny Green has his big game. Game 3, that was Serge Ibaka's game. Game 4, that was Russell Westbrook's game. If you're the MVP of the league, don't you have to have a game that you dominate?
Shouldn't one of those be your game?
One of those has to be your game, especially if you fall down 2-0 in the series and then tie it up. You think that one of these next two games, if they do force a Game 7, will be his. I would bet money on Game 6, but if the Thunder win Game 6 and don't rely on him too much, Kevin Durant puts up pretty darn good numbers in Game 7. So as much as this has been advantage for the home team, I wouldn't put it past the Thunder to somehow still pull this out if they can force a Game 7.
All right, let us go ahead and move on to...
Interesting stat on Durant, if I may, real quick.
Yes.
Per 36 minutes in the regular season, 9.3 free throw attempts per 36. In the playoffs, he's down almost 2 full attempts per 36. 7.5. That's a pretty marked difference.
Yeah, if we're talking percentages, but that's one reason why I like Westbrook more than I like Durant. Westbrook, he does take a lot of jumpers that maybe he shouldn't, but he also goes to the basket hard and often, and Durant just doesn't do it. I don't know if his body wouldn't be able to hold up, or if whatever. I don't know. I've had this argument on Twitter for the last umpteen days, so I'm a little burnt out on it, but I'm a Westbrook supporter.
Top offensive rebounder for Oklahoma City in the playoffs.
Yeah, Russell Westbrook, right?
Russell Westbrook.
Yeah. Gerald, why don't you ask Nathan your NCAA question here, and then we'll hit the lightning round.
Sure. First part of the question is, who of the big three, Andrew Wiggins, Jabari Parker, Joel Embiid, has the brightest future?
Oh, this one is kind of loaded, but for me, I'm going to go with Jabari Parker. And I go on the basis that I know what I'm getting out of him right away. And you can expand on that in the NBA. The thing that scares me about Wiggins and Embiid is that there's tweaking that you have to do to their game. Embiid's only been playing basketball for a few years. He's already got a bad back. He'll have a physical in the next couple of days, so we'll know what's going on there. And Wiggins, he's got the tools to be great, but I don't know if he'll actually use those tools to get to that point. Parker, he's already at a point where he is on his way to being great. He's got the good tools. He's got a good head on his shoulders. I trust him more than I trust the two Kansas players right now.
Okay. And that's interesting that you say that, because he's obviously the most NBA ready. That's what we keep hearing about Parker. But that also seems to go hand in hand with he doesn't have as much upside, which is kind of an interesting pairing there.
He has upside. The thing is that I don't even think he's reached the pinnacle of his game. I think he can get to that point in about 2-3 solid years, with depending on the franchise he ends up with, because, I mean, you look at the top 3 teams that are drafting, they're not really known for making superstars as the way they're set up right now anyway. He has upside, but you don't hear about it as often because the other two, they're all upside.
Right.
It's all about the upside with those two.
And last part of the question was, out of the big three, big three aside, who do you think is going to be the steal of the draft? Who's Damian Lillard in this draft?
There's going to be a lot of varying opinion on this, and I had 2 guys I like for it, but I'm going to go with Kyle Anderson of UCLA. you don't see a lot of 6'9" point guards anymore, and Steve Alford had him doing that this last year at UCLA after he was a power forward. When he was a power forward, he didn't really have a great season. I believe it was about 9 points, 8 rebounds a game, in about 30 minutes per game. Didn't have a lot of impact, but once he moved over to point guard, he was still a bit raw as a ball handler. Obviously, 6'9", he's not accustomed to being a point guard, point forward, whatever we want to label him. And this year he was flirting with triple-double numbers. Nearly 15 points a game, about 9 rebounds, just about 7 assists, and he didn't shoot a lot of threes, but he shot almost 50% from downtown. He's a versatile player who can play any of the 5 positions in a given situation. He can play center if you want to go small. A lot of people just want to label him as a small forward. I think he's more than that. And he's still relatively young, coming out after his sophomore year. There's room for him to grow, but I like what I see from him, and I think there's going to be a lot of teams kicking themselves for not picking this guy.
I like that choice, and I'm also glad that you brought up Steve Alford because he did a great job with him this year. But go Lobos!
Oh,
don't you? We walked right into that one. All right, Okay, Phil, do it.
Quick point on Wiggins. Am I the only one that has watched this guy? I've seen this guy play 8 or 9 times. I see Marvin Williams 2.0.
Oh boy.
Oh, I completely agree with you. The thing about Wiggins with me is that I think there's a lot going on in his head with the hype surrounding him, and he's expected to be amazing. And I mentioned this in a piece I have out tomorrow. There was a point where he came into college expected to be amazing. Once he started to disappoint a little bit, he got all this criticism onto him. So everybody started toning it down a little bit. Started playing great. Nobody really mentioned much because that's what he was supposed to be doing all along. Tournament comes around, disappoints. Oh, he can't do much. He's going to be a bust. Now we're talking draft. Upside, greatest thing in the world. I just don't see it right now. I mean, I want to, and I want to believe that these players can all be great, but they can't. There's just how it works. And Wiggins just has busts written all over him because of all that hype.
All right, let us move on to fill in the blank. We got 3 questions. We'll make it quick. Number 1, blowing in an opponent's ear is, Phil?
So very wrong.
Nathan?
Wrong. I had to think about it a little bit. Just no.
Gerald?
How you win the internet.
You know what? My favorite one that I saw was Stephenson blowing into a Nintendo cartridge. That brought me back. All right, number 2, Kevin Love should blank. Phil?
Milk it for all it's worth.
Nathan?
Party like it's 1999.
Gerald?
Come to Phoenix.
The correct answer is come to Phoenix. The Cleveland Cavaliers' number 1 pick should be Phil?
Wow.
Now you know how hard my job is.
Embiid.
Peace?
Parker.
Jorge?
Joel Embiid.
I'm sorry, the correct answer is traded. It should be traded. Think of how much. Think of how much they could get. Okay. Let's move on to one word, just the very, very first word that comes to mind when you hear Vinny Del Negro's coaching. Phil?
What?
Nathan?
Interesting.
Gerald?
Lols.
Yeah, I would go with horrific, but that's not bad. One word, Lance Stephenson. Phil?
Nut job.
Peace?
This word is hyphenated, so it still counts. Cray cray.
Gerald?
Enigma.
I'm going with overrated. Greg Popovich. Phil?
Best.
Nathan?
Subtle.
So, Gerald?
Nasty.
I'm going with curmudgeon. Final segment of the night, over, under. I'm going to give you 3 different scenarios, give you a number. You tell me whether you think it's over or under. Now, you guys know Joe Johnson does not dunk the ball very often.
Oh, yes.
In his last 3 regular seasons, over or under 7 dunks? Phil?
Under.
Nathan?
Under.
Gerald?
I'll take the over.
The correct answer is 5. It was under. Gerald and Watson. That's 5 dunks in 3 seasons.
For 7-time All-Star Joe Johnson.
6'8". Next up, Chris Bosh free throw attempts per game during this year's playoffs. Over, under, 3 per game. Phil?
Under.
Nathan?
Over.
Gerald?
Under.
It is under. 2.2 attempts per game, 0 last game. Geese got that one wrong. Watson's got a 2-1 lead. Last question. LeBron James' last regular season or playoff game scoring under 10 points was over or under 250 games ago. Phil?
Over.
Geese?
Over.
Gerald?
I know there was a game in the 11 finals when he scored like 9. So by doing the math, I don't do math so good. So I'm going to say over.
It is over. All 3 of you got it correct. A big round of applause for Phil Watson for getting all 3 correct.
Oh.
He's amazing in one way. He is a stat man. Well, that is our show for this week.
Amazing in many ways.
Oh,
We don't want to know.
yeah, let's just...
See, you guys went right to the wrong direction.
That is our show for this week. We are going to be back next week. Throughout the offseason, we'll be here every other week leading into the 2014-2015 season. We'll be here every week. So this has been the Hoops Habit Hangout number 18. Next week we'll have a different guest, but hopefully Gerald's technical difficulties will be taken care of. I'll be here. Phil will be here. Nathan, thank you very much for joining us today. And all of our viewers, all 3 of you that stuck through, thank you very much.